"My mommy is sick," and her boss refused to pay her. The little girl said it so calmly that most people in the hotel lobby would have walked right past her. But the man who stopped wasn't just any guest, he was Victor Ciobanu, a mafia boss who doesn't tolerate cruelty. And when he realized who that boss really was, someone's life in that hotel was about to be destroyed. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. The rain had been falling since early evening, and by midnight it showed no intention of stopping. It came down hard against the tall glass panels flanking the entrance of the Blackwood Grand Hotel, streaking the windows in long, trembling lines that blurred the city lights beyond into something impressionist and cold. Inside, the lobby held its warmth, carefully chandelier light pooling golden across marble floors, the occasional flicker of a table lamp near the reception desk casting soft shadows against dark wood paneling. The staff moved quietly at this hour. A receptionist typed something without looking up. A doorman stood at his post with the practiced stillness of a man who had learned not to notice things. It was the kind of quiet that expensive places manufactured deliberately. Victor Ciobanu did not notice the quiet. He moved through environments like this the way water moves through familiar ground, without resistance, without ceremony. He came through the main entrance at 8 minutes past midnight, his black suit unrumpled despite the hour, collar open at the throat, the rain having barely touched him in the few steps between the car and the door. His dark hair was slightly damp at the edges. On his hands and neck, tattoos surfaced at the borders of his clothing, deliberate, unhurried marks that had accumulated over a life most people in this lobby would not survive a single chapter of. 2 men followed him at a respectful distance. They always did. The staff noticed him the way trained staff always noticed men like Victor, carefully, peripherally, without making it obvious. He had stayed here before. He had held meetings in the private suites upstairs before. To the front desk, he was a guest with a reservation and a black card that never declined. That was enough. That was all they needed to know. Victor's mind was already upstairs. The meeting waiting for him on the 14th floor involved a property dispute, 3 investors, 1 contract, and a disagreement that had quietly outgrown the courtroom. Victor had been called in not as a lawyer or a mediator, but as the kind of presence that made disagreements resolve faster. He was thinking through the variables as he crossed the lobby, cataloging the angles the way he always did, calculating what each man in that room wanted badly enough to compromise over. He was not thinking about the bench near the entrance. He was not thinking about anything in the lobby at all, until he was. It was something in his peripheral vision that slowed him first, not a sound, not a movement, but the specific wrongness of a small shape, in a place where small shapes did not belong at this hour. Victor's pace didn't stop immediately. It reduced, became deliberate. His eyes moved left. A little girl. She sat on a wooden bench positioned near the glass wall by the entrance, close enough that the rain light played across her face in shifting patterns. She was perhaps 6 years old, small even for that, dressed in an olive green jacket that had been worn enough to soften at the elbows and collar. Beneath it, a knitted scarf the color of wheat was looped loosely around her neck. Her boots were brown, slightly scuffed at the toes. In her arms, held against her chest with both hands, the way a much younger child holds a stuffed animal, was a purple backpack, compact and faded, its zipper pull catching the light. She was not crying. She was not looking around the room for someone. She was not fidgeting or talking to herself, or doing any of the things a child alone at midnight in a hotel lobby might reasonably be expected to do. She was simply sitting, still in the way that children almost never are, not the stillness of sleep or distraction, but the stillness of someone who has learned to wait without expecting the wait to be short. Victor stopped. He stood for a moment, studying her from a few meters away. In his line of work, he had learned to distinguish between people performing calm and people who had arrived at it through necessity. This child had not been coached into sitting quietly. She had arrived here on her own through something she had already lived through, already understood, at an age when understanding should not yet be this heavy. His 2 men stopped when he stopped. They exchanged a glance but said nothing. Victor walked toward her. He did not loom. He did not approach with the full weight of his height, which would have frightened her. Instead, he lowered himself, crouching down until he was level with her, his forearms resting across his knees, his tattooed hands loosely clasped in front of him. The posture was careful. Practiced, though he could not have said where he had practiced it. The girl looked up at him. She did not flinch. That surprised him. Most adults in his proximity found reasons to look away. This child simply looked at him with dark, steady eyes, not fearless exactly, but composed in a way that suggested she had already evaluated him and decided something. "Where are your parents?" Victor asked. His voice came out quieter than he intended. "My mommy is working," the girl said. She said it simply, without complaint, as though it were just information. Victor glanced once toward the reception desk, then back at her. "And your father?" The girl gave a small, definitive shake of her head. The kind of shake that meant more than not here. The kind that meant that is a different kind of question. Victor held her gaze. "What's your name?" "Harper." "Harper." He said it once, the way he repeated names when he was committing them to memory. "How long have you been sitting here?" She considered this with genuine seriousness, the way children consider questions adults treat as casual. "A long time," she decided. He nodded slowly. Then he asked again, more gently, "Where is your mommy working right now?" Harper's chin lifted slightly. She pointed upward past the chandelier, past the ceiling, toward the floors above them. "In this hotel?" she said. Then, after a pause so brief it almost didn't exist, "My mommy is sick." Her voice stayed level, steady, and her boss refused to pay her. Victor Ciobanu did not move. The lobby continued its quiet around them. The soft keystrokes at the front desk, the rain against the glass, the distant sound of the elevator opening on an upper floor, everything exactly as it had been 60 seconds ago. Except that Victor was no longer thinking about the meeting upstairs. He was thinking about a little girl who had learned how to wait, and about who had taught her. Victor did not stand up immediately. He stayed crouched in front of her, at her level, in the way he had lowered himself a few minutes ago, as though standing too quickly might break something fragile that had only just formed between them. The marble floor was cold beneath his shoes. The rain continued its work against the glass behind her, relentless and indifferent. "Her boss refused to pay her," he repeated slowly. Not a question. He was testing the weight of the words, letting them settle into him properly before he responded to them. Harper nodded. One small, certain movement. "How do you know that?" Victor asked. She looked down at the purple backpack in her arms for a moment, just a moment, as though deciding how much to say. Then she looked back up at him, with those steady dark eyes, and said, "I heard her crying." Victor said nothing. "On the phone," Harper continued. "This afternoon, before she came to work, she was talking to someone, and she kept saying sorry." A small pause. Mommy doesn't usually say sorry that many times. There was no drama in how she delivered this. No wobbling lip, no performance of sadness. She stated it the way a child states a fact they have already spent considerable time alone with, turned it over, examined it, set it down somewhere inside themselves where it wouldn't keep moving. That restraint, Victor thought, was the saddest thing he had seen in a long time. "What's your mother's name?" he asked. "Charlotte," Harper said. Then after a breath, "Charlotte White. But everyone here calls her Charlie. Does she know you're sitting down here?" Harper's eyes dropped briefly again. "She thinks I'm upstairs in the staff room." A beat, but it smelled funny in there, and nobody was in it. She pulled the backpack slightly tighter against her chest. "I didn't want to be in a room by myself. So she had come down here instead, to a lobby full of strangers, to a wooden bench beside a rain-streaked window, and she had simply sat, because a room full of strangers felt less lonely than an empty room." Victor understood that particular mathematics more than he wished to. "How long has your mother been sick?" he asked. Harper thought about it carefully, the way she seemed to think about everything. "Since before Christmas," she said. "But she said it's getting better." A small furrow appeared between her brows. "She says that a lot, that things are getting better. Do you believe her?" Harper looked at him for a long moment, long enough that Victor felt it. "I believe she wants them to," she said finally. He held her gaze and felt something old and unannounced move through his chest. The sensation was unfamiliar enough that he almost didn't recognize it. It wasn't pity. He had learned young that pity was a useless currency, heavy to carry and worthless when spent. This was something older than pity, something closer to recognition. His mother had said things were getting better too. She had said it in a room not unlike a staff room, small, fluorescent lit, smelling of industrial cleaner and recycled air. She had said it while pulling her hair back before a night shift, while checking that young Victor had something to eat, while pretending that the cough she had developed was seasonal and temporary and nothing to worry about. He had believed she wanted them to, too. Victor stood up slowly. Not because the conversation was over, but because he needed a moment where the girl couldn't see his face clearly. He turned slightly, the way a man turns to look at nothing in particular when he needs his expression to reset. One of his men, Radu, who had worked with Victor for 11 years, caught his eye from across the lobby. Victor gave him a look that communicated nothing visible to anyone else but communicated everything to Radu. The man gave a small nod and reached for his phone. Victor turned back to Harper. "Has your mother worked here long?" he asked, his voice level again. 2 years, Harper said. "She really likes it. She says the hotel is beautiful." She glanced around the lobby with the frank, unhurried assessment of a child seeing something as it actually is, not as she's supposed to see it. "It is beautiful," she agreed, as though confirming her mother's taste was sound. Despite everything, something almost moved across Victor's face. "She hasn't been paid," he said quietly. "For how long?" "I don't know exactly." Harper's brows drew together. "But she had to borrow money from Mrs. Aldea next door to buy my lunch things last week. And Mommy doesn't like borrowing." She said this last part with a particular weight, as though the borrowing had troubled Charlotte more than the hunger had. She told Mrs. Aldea she'd pay her back on Friday. But Friday came and she still hadn't been paid. So she called the hotel, and the man said... Harper stopped. "What did the man say?" Victor asked. "That she missed days, that it was her fault." Harper's voice stayed even, but something behind her eyes shifted. "But she didn't miss days because she wanted to. She missed days because she was sick. And when you're sick, you can't help it." She said this with the absolute moral clarity that only children possess, that clean, uncluttered certainty about what is fair and what is not, uncorrupted yet by the explanations adults construct to make unfairness livable. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been sharpening itself since she first looked up at him from this bench. The man who told her that the one who refused to pay her. His voice was careful, measured. "Is he the manager of this hotel?" Harper nodded. Victor straightened fully. He adjusted the cuff of his jacket once a small, precise movement, and glanced toward the elevator at the far end of the lobby. He thought about the meeting upstairs, the investors, the property dispute, the careful calculation of leverage he had been running through his mind all evening. Then he thought about Charlotte White, borrowing money from a neighbor for school lunches, coming to work sick because the alternative was losing everything, crying on the phone and apologizing while her daughter listened through a door. The meeting could wait. "Stay here," he told Harper. "Don't move from this bench." She looked up at him. "Are you going to help my mommy?" she asked. Victor Ciobanu reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved his phone. "I'm going to make a phone call," he said quietly. It wasn't an answer, but somehow, Harper seemed to understand that it was. The hotel manager's name was Doran Petrescu. Victor learned this in under 4 minutes, the time it took Radu to make 2 phone calls and cross the lobby with the information delivered in a low, efficient murmur. Doran Petrescu, 43 years old, 12 years in hospitality management, 7 months in his current role at the Blackwood Grand. Victor absorbed this without expression and told Radu to have the man brought downstairs. He did not phrase it as a request. While he waited, Victor returned to the bench where Harper sat. He didn't crowd her. He positioned himself a short distance away, close enough that she wasn't alone, far enough that she had space. He had learned somewhere in a life that had not made such lessons easy, that people who were already carrying something heavy did not need the additional weight of someone else's proximity pressing in on them. Harper had her backpack open now, small hands rummaging through it with the focused seriousness of a child conducting an inventory. She produced a slightly bent granola bar, examined it, and began eating it in careful, measured bites. Victor watched her without appearing to. It occurred to him that this was likely her dinner. The elevator at the far end of the lobby opened 7 minutes after Radu's call. Doran Petrescu stepped out, looking the way men look when they've been pulled from somewhere comfortable unexpectedly. Jacket slightly rushed. Expression arranged into professional pleasantness, but not quite reaching the eyes. He was a broad man, thick through the shoulders, with the particular confidence of someone who managed people for a living and had grown accustomed to that small authority feeling like real authority. He scanned the lobby, found Victor, and approached with his hand already extended. "Good evening, sir. I understand you wanted to speak with management." "Charlotte White," Victor said. He did not take the hand. Petrescu's extended arm completed its journey to nowhere and returned to his side. The professional pleasantness on his face recalibrated slightly. "I'm sorry? Charlotte White," Victor repeated. She works in this hotel. Night cleaning staff. She hasn't been paid. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. I'd like to understand why. Something moved behind Petrescu's eyes. A quick internal calculation. The kind that happens when a man tries to determine how much the person in front of him actually knows. Then the professional pleasantness reasserted itself. Smoother this time. More deliberate. I see. Petrescu clasped his hands in front of him. Well, I appreciate your concern, but employee payroll matters are confidential by nature. And without knowing your relationship to... Consider me interested, Victor said. That's enough relationship for tonight. Petrescu studied him. Victor held his gaze without effort, without aggression, without anything that could be named or pointed to. Just held it, the way a wall holds space. Mrs. White. Petrescu began carefully. Has had some attendance issues over the past several weeks. Our payroll system is structured around verified hours, and when hours cannot be confirmed due to absences... She was sick, Victor said. That may be, but the hotel has procedures. She was sick, Victor said again, quieter this time. And she still came in. Petrescu paused. Some absences were documented. Yes, but how many weeks of wages are being withheld? Another calculation behind the eyes. I'm not in a position to discuss specific. How many weeks? The question arrived without volume and without warmth, and it landed the way such questions land, when delivered by men who have never needed to raise their voice to be taken seriously. Petrescu felt it. Victor watched him feel it. There may be, Petrescu said, more slowly now, 3 to 4 weeks of disputed wages under review. Victor said nothing. He had already taken his phone from his jacket pocket. He held it at his side, screen facing away from Petrescu, and pressed record. The gesture was small enough to mean nothing. He had done it before the man finished his sentence. Disputed by whom? Victor asked. By the department, based on attendance records. Has she been given written documentation of these disputes? Petrescu shifted his weight slightly. The standard process involves... Has she been given written documentation? Victor said. Yes or no? A beat. The process is ongoing. Victor looked at him for a long moment. In the silence, the rain against the glass was very audible. Somewhere behind the reception desk, a phone rang twice and was answered in a murmur. He was watching Petrescu the way he watched everyone in rooms like this, not for what they said, but for what happened in the spaces between the words. And what was happening in those spaces was not the discomfort of a manager caught in a bureaucratic oversight. It was something else. Something that moved differently. Faster. With too much awareness behind it. The man was not embarrassed. He was careful. There was a significant difference. Mrs. White has a daughter, Victor said. He did not look toward the bench. He did not need to. Approximately 6 years old. The child has been sitting alone in this lobby for, he checked his watch, at minimum an hour and a half. While her mother works a shift she is physically unwell to be completing, because she was told that missing another shift would cost her the job. Petrescu's jaw tightened fractionally. Employees are made aware of attendance expectations. Was she threatened with termination? I wouldn't characterize it as, was she told she would lose her job if she missed another shift? The silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Victor looked at the man, really looked at him, and felt the shape of something he couldn't name, yet harden in the back of his mind. In his experience, guilt presented in predictable ways. Defensiveness, justification, the rapid stacking of reasons. Petrescu was doing all of those things, but underneath them, something else was operating. Victor could not see it clearly yet, but it was there. He had not built the life he had built by ignoring the things he couldn't see clearly yet. We're not finished, Victor said. His voice carried no threat. It didn't need to. I'll want to continue this conversation shortly. Don't leave the hotel. Petrescu opened his mouth, then closed it. He gave a short, stiff nod and turned back toward the elevator with the careful walk of a man concentrating on appearing unhurried. Victor watched him go. Then he stood quietly in the middle of the marble lobby, phone still recording in his hand, and thought about a man who was too nervous for someone who had simply failed to process a paycheck, too nervous by a significant amount. And that, in Victor Ciobanu's considerable experience, meant only one thing. There was something underneath this, and he was going to find it. Victor returned to the bench. Harper had finished the granola bar and folded the wrapper into a precise small square, the way children do when they have been taught to be tidy and have taken the lesson seriously. She held the folded wrapper in her palm, looking around for a bin, and when she spotted one across the lobby, she glanced at Victor as though asking silent permission before sliding off the bench to dispose of it. She came back and climbed back up onto the bench with the quiet self-sufficiency of a child accustomed to managing small things alone. Victor sat beside her this time. Not close, just present. "The man you spoke to," Harper said, without looking at him. "The big one." "Yes." "He has a mean face," she said simply, "even when he's smiling." Victor looked at her. "You noticed that?" "Mommy told me to pay attention to faces," Harper said. "She says people's faces tell you things their words don't." Victor was quiet for a moment. "Your mother sounds like a smart woman." Harper nodded, with the solemn certainty of someone confirming an established fact. "She's the smartest person I know." A pause. "She knows all the words to every song on the radio, even the fast ones." Something shifted in Victor's chest, a movement so quiet he almost missed it. He looked away. He had been in this hotel enough times to know the layout of the upper floors, the suite corridors, the service routes, the back staircases the cleaning staff used to move between floors without intersecting with guests. He knew, in the abstract way that men who own fractions of things know them, that the night cleaning crew worked a rotation across floors 8 through 14, starting at the top and moving down. Charlotte White had been working somewhere in that rotation for the past several hours, sick, alone, while her daughter sat on a bench in the lobby folding granola bar wrappers into squares and paying attention to faces. Victor turned to Radu, who had maintained his position a discreet distance away throughout everything. He spoke quietly. "Go upstairs. Service floors, 8 through 14. Find Charlotte White, night cleaning staff." He paused. "Be careful how you approach her. Don't frighten her." Radu nodded and moved toward the elevator without a word. Victor looked back at Harper. "Someone is going to check on your mother," he said. Harper looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts relief and something more complicated, the particular wariness of a child who has been told things were being handled before and has learned to withhold full belief. "Until evidence arrives." "Okay," she said carefully. They sat in a silence that was not uncomfortable. Outside, the rain had shifted character, less aggressive now, more persistent, a steady gray murmur against the glass. The lobby had grown quieter still. The receptionist had been replaced by a night clerk who sat with his hands folded and his eyes at a professional distance. One of the table lamps near the far wall had been dimmed. Harper swung her legs slowly from the bench, boots not quite reaching the floor. "Do you work here?" she asked. "No," Victor said. "Then why are you still here?" She asked it without accusation, genuinely curious. Victor considered the question more seriously than she probably expected him to. "Because something needed to be looked into," he said finally. "And I was the one standing here." Harper appeared to find this acceptable. She nodded and returned to swinging her legs. 4 minutes passed. Then Victor's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. A single message from Radu. 3 words. "Come up now." Victor stood. He looked at Harper and made a rapid, instinctive assessment. Leaving her alone again was not something he was willing to do. He signaled the second man, a quieter figure named George who had been stationed near the entrance, and spoke to him in a low, direct tone. "Stay with the child. Don't leave her line of sight. If she needs anything, get it." George moved to a position nearby without comment. Victor looked down at Harper. "I need to go upstairs for a few minutes. This man is going to stay close by. His name is George. He's safe." He held her gaze. "I'll be back." Harper looked at George with her mother's taut assessment taking in his face, his posture, whatever language those things spoke to her. Then she looked back at Victor. "Okay," she said, this time without the wariness. Victor moved. He took the elevator to the 11th floor and followed the service corridor east, where Radu was waiting outside a suite with the door partially open. The expression on Radu's face was one Victor had seen before, the careful blankness of a man suppressing a reaction because the moment didn't call for one. Victor pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. The suite's main room was dim, lit only by the light spilling through from the bathroom and the ambient glow of the city through the large windows. A cleaning trolley stood near the center of the room, slightly askew, as though it had been abandoned mid-movement. Charlotte White was on the floor beside it. She was conscious barely, sitting with her back against the side of the bed, knees drawn up, one hand pressed flat against the carpet, as though she had been trying to push herself upright and hadn't been able to finish the effort. She was a slight woman, younger than Victor had expected, with dark circles beneath her eyes so deep they looked like bruising. Her uniform was neat despite everything. Even in this moment, the collar was straight. She looked up when Victor entered, and the first thing she said before she asked who he was, before she asked for help was, "Harper." Her voice scraped. "Is Harper?" "She's downstairs," Victor said immediately, crossing to her. "She's safe. She's with someone I trust." Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. The relief that moved across her face was so total and so unguarded that it was almost too private a thing to witness. Victor crouched beside her. Up close, he could see the tension in her jaw, the shallow work of her breathing, the pallor beneath her skin that had nothing to do with the lighting. "How long have you been on the floor?" he asked quietly. "I don't," she swallowed with difficulty. "A little while." "Can you stand?" She started to say yes. Her body answered differently, a sharp wince, a tremor in the arm she tried to push herself up with. "No," Victor said gently. "Don't." He looked at Radu. "Call the car," he said. "Now." He turned back to Charlotte, and his voice dropped to something that was not softness exactly, but was the closest thing to it that his voice could produce. "I'm going to get you out of here," he said. "And then someone is going to explain to me how you ended up on this floor." Charlotte looked at him with exhausted, bewildered eyes. "Who are you?" Victor held her gaze. "Someone who was standing in the right place tonight," he said. And then he carefully, deliberately helped Charlotte White to her feet, and did not let go until he was certain she wouldn't fall. The private clinic was 20 minutes from the hotel. Victor's car covered it in 14. He sat in the front, leaving the back seat to Charlotte and Harper, who had said nothing when she saw her mother being guided through the lobby. Nothing at all, just slid off the bench and walked directly to her and pressed herself against Charlotte's side with a quiet ferocity that required no words. Charlotte's arm had come around her instantly, automatically, the way breathing is automatic. Her face, already pale, had done something complicated that Victor did not look at directly. Georgi had retrieved a blanket from somewhere. Victor didn't ask where. Now he sat with his phone in his hand, watching the rain-blurred city move past the window, and made the first call. The man who answered was named Tiberiu. He was not a private investigator in the formal sense. He held no license, maintained no office, appeared in no professional directory. What he maintained was an extremely accurate picture of financial movements, personal arrangements, and the quiet agreements that people made when they believed no one credible was paying attention. "Charlotte White," Victor said. "Night cleaning staff, Blackwood Grand Hotel, and the manager Doran Petrescu. I want everything. Start with Petrescu." "How fast?" "I'm already waiting," Victor said. He ended the call and watched the city. In the back seat, he could hear Harper's voice very low, very steady, telling her mother about the granola bar and the bench, and the man with the tattoos who had stayed. Charlotte responded in murmurs. At one point, she made a sound that was not quite a word, and Victor understood without turning around that she was crying silently, in the way adults cry when they are trying not to alarm a child. He looked out the window and said nothing, and let them have the darkness of the back seat. The clinic received Charlotte without bureaucratic friction. Victor had made a second call during the drive. By the time they arrived, a room was prepared, a physician was present, and no one asked questions about insurance. Harper sat in a chair beside her mother's bed and held Charlotte's hand with both of hers, her purple backpack on her lap, her small face composed into an expression of determined calm that Victor recognized from the lobby bench. The same patience, the same careful stillness. Charlotte had tried, twice, to tell Victor he didn't need to stay. He had not responded to this, which she eventually accepted. He positioned himself outside the room in the corridor close enough, far enough, and waited for Tiberiu to call back. The call came 47 minutes later. Victor listened without speaking for most of it. He asked 3 questions, short ones. Then he thanked Tiberiu and ended the call, and stood in the corridor for a moment with the phone hanging at his side. Then he walked to the window at the end of the hall, and stood looking out at the rain and processed what he had just been told. Doran Petrescu had been receiving payments, not from the hotel, not from any payroll account or bonus structure, or legitimate incentive program, from a private source, routed carefully through 2 intermediary accounts that had been set up to look like contractor payments for facilities services. The payments had begun 8 months ago. The source, once Tiberiu had unraveled the intermediaries, was a man named Gelu Barbu, Charlotte White's ex-husband. Victor knew the name within moments of hearing it, not personally, but by category. Tiberiu filled in the specifics. Gelu Barbu, 38 years old. A history of documented incidents, 2 restraining orders, 1 conviction for assault that had been reduced on appeal, a custody case that he had lost comprehensively 18 months ago, when Charlotte presented evidence of his behavior to the family court. The judge had been unambiguous: full custody to Charlotte. Supervised visitation rights suspended, pending a psychological evaluation that Barbu had declined to complete. He had lost Harper entirely, and he had decided, with the particular logic of men like him, that if he couldn't take what he wanted directly, he would dismantle the thing standing between him and it. The plan, as Tiberiu laid it out through financial records and intercepted communications, was methodical in its cruelty. Barbu had identified Petrescu, a man with manageable debts and flexible ethics, and approached him quietly. The arrangement was simple. Petrescu would delay Charlotte's wages. He would document her sick days as unauthorized absences. He would increase her workload incrementally. He would keep the pressure calibrated enough to exhaust her, to destabilize her, to push her toward a point where she could no longer demonstrate to any court that she was capable of providing a stable home. If Charlotte broke down completely financially, physically, professionally, Barbu would return to court. And this time, he would have documented evidence that she couldn't manage. Victor stood at the window and let this settle into him fully. Outside, the rain had not stopped. The city continued below, indifferent, going about the business of being a city at 2 a.m, taxis and lit windows and people moving through the wet streets with their collars up, everyone carrying their own weather. He thought about Charlotte on the floor of that hotel suite, hand flat against the carpet, collar straight even then. He thought about Harper on the bench, folding a granola bar wrapper into a square. He thought about the careful, patient stillness of a child who had learned to wait without expecting the wait to be short, and understood now where that stillness had come from, what had slowly, systematically been constructed around that child to produce it. A man had looked at his daughter and seen leverage. That was the thing Victor kept returning to. Not the bribery. Bribery was a transaction, and transactions he understood. Not even the cruelty of it. The deliberate grinding down of a sick woman through withheld wages and manufactured paperwork. Those were methods. He had seen methods before. What stopped him at the window, what he kept returning to, was the specific coldness required to look at your own child sitting on a bench at midnight and consider that useful. Victor had known many dangerous men. He was, by most reasonable definitions, one himself. But there was a particular category of dangerous that had nothing to do with power or violence or the careful management of fear, a category defined only by what a person was willing to treat as expendable. Gelu Barbu had placed his 6-year-old daughter in that category. Victor turned from the window. He walked back down the corridor to Charlotte's room and looked through the small glass panel in the door. Charlotte was asleep or something close to it, finally, after what her body had been refusing to surrender to for weeks. Harper was still in the chair beside her, still holding her mother's hand, her head now resting against the edge of the bed, eyes closed. Still there, still holding on. Victor looked at them for a long moment. Then he straightened and took out his phone and made the call that would end Doran Petrescu's career before morning. And then he made the other call, the one that would ensure Gelu Barbu understood, in terms that required no legal interpretation, that his plan had not merely failed. It had arrived at exactly the wrong person. The corridor was quiet at 3 a.m, not the manufactured quiet of the hotel lobby, carpeted, chandelier lit, designed to communicate comfort. This was the functional quiet of a medical facility after hours, punctuated only by the soft rhythm of monitoring equipment behind closed doors, and the occasional footstep of a night nurse, moving with the unhurried efficiency of someone who had learned to exist without disturbing the air. Victor sat in a chair outside Charlotte's room. He had not sat down in some time. His body had reminded him of this in the small, insistent way bodies remind men who ignore them, a tightness across the shoulders, a weight behind the eyes. He had accepted the chair without acknowledging that he needed it, which was the only way he ever accepted anything that resembled concession. Radu had positioned himself at the end of the corridor. Georgi was downstairs. The clinic's night staff had been professionally incurious about the arrangement, which told Victor that the physician he'd called had set the right expectations before their arrival. He held his phone and looked at the name on the screen. Octavian Luca. He had known Octavian for 19 years, across a relationship that had never been entirely comfortable and had never needed to be. Octavian was 71 years old, operated out of Zurich for the purposes of taxation, and out of everywhere else for the purposes of everything else, and had assembled over 5 decades a portfolio of holdings so diversified and so deliberately obscured that most financial analysts, who tried to map it, simply stopped at some point and wrote private interests in the space where specifics should have been. Among those private interests was a hotel group. Among that hotel group was the Blackwood Grand. Octavian Luca did not know Victor had been in his hotel tonight. He did not know a woman named Charlotte White existed, or that a child had been sitting alone in his lobby at midnight, or that a manager he was paying a considerable salary to had been accepting bribes to destroy a single mother's livelihood on behalf of her abusive ex-husband. He was about to know all of it. Victor pressed call. It rang 4 times long enough that Victor had already composed what he would say to a voicemail, and then the line opened. Victor. The voice was alert. Octavian Luca had not, as far as Victor knew, slept easily since his 50s. It's past 3. I know what time it is, Victor said. A brief pause. Then this isn't casual. No. He heard the old man shift the specific sound of someone moving from wherever they had been resting to somewhere they intended to be upright for. A door opening. A quieter room. Tell me, Octavian said. Victor told him. He was not a man who used more words than necessary, and the account he gave was precise and sequential. The lobby, the child, the conversation with Harper, the exchange with Petrescu, what Tiberio had found in the financial records, he named Gelu Barbu. He described the structure of the payments. He described Charlotte White on the floor of Suite 11, with her hand flat against the carpet and her collar still straight. He said that last part once and did not return to it. Octavian listened without interrupting. This was one of the things Victor had respected about him for 19 years. When Victor finished, there was a silence on the line that lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Petrescu has been with the hotel 7 months, Octavian said finally. Yes. And Tiberio is certain about the payment routing? Tiberio is always certain, Victor said. That is what I pay him for. Another silence. Shorter. I want the documentation sent to my director of operations within the hour, Octavian said. His voice had changed, not louder, not harder, but the way a room changes when the temperature drops by several degrees without any single identifiable cause. I'll handle the internal process personally. I'd prefer it moved faster than a process, Victor said. It will. A pause. You have my word. I know, Victor said. That's why I called you instead of handling it myself. This landed the way it was intended to, not as a threat, but as a precise statement of what the alternative had looked like before this call was made. Octavian understood. He had understood Victor for 19 years. The woman, Octavian said. Charlotte White. She's being treated? Yes. At your arrangement? Yes. A brief pause. I'll have the hotel's insurance coverage applied retroactively, and her wages, all of them, will be transferred before morning. He paused again, and when he spoke next, something in his voice had shifted almost imperceptibly. She should not have been in that position. Not in any building with my name on it. Victor said nothing. He had made his points. They had landed. The ex-husband, Octavian said. Barbu. I'll manage Barbu separately, Victor said. The old man did not ask how. Another thing Victor had respected for 19 years. Is there anything else tonight? Octavian asked. Victor looked through the glass panel in the door. Charlotte was still asleep. Harper had shifted in the chair, her head now resting more fully against the mattress, her grip on her mother's hand maintained even in sleep, fingers loosely interlaced with Charlotte's, as though even unconsciously, she was unwilling to be the one to let go first. No, Victor said. That's everything for tonight. He ended the call, and held the phone in his hands, and sat in the functional quiet of the corridor, and did not move for a while. He was not a man given to reflection as a practice. His life had been built on forward motion, the next decision, the next room, the next arrangement to be made or unmade. Looking backward was a luxury he had learned early to distrust. But sitting here, at 3 a.m. in a clinic corridor with rain still faintly audible somewhere beyond the building's walls, he found himself thinking about his mother, about the shifts she had worked while sick, about the wages that had sometimes arrived late or short or not at all, about the small adjustments she had made without complaint, the dinners that were slightly smaller, the heating that was turned down a degree, the careful refolding of things that needed to last longer than they were made to last, about the fact that no one had ever made a single phone call on her behalf. Not one. Victor stood up from the chair. He straightened his jacket, and he walked to the end of the corridor where Radu was standing, and told him what was going to happen to Doran Petrescu by morning, clearly, specifically, without embellishment. Radu listened. Then he said, quietly, "And the manager thinks he was speaking to a hotel guest." "Yes," Victor said. Radu was quiet for a moment. He has no idea, he said. No, Victor agreed. He looked back down the corridor toward the room where a woman slept, and a child held her hand, and the rain continued outside, and the night continued its long, slow work of becoming morning. He had no idea at all. Doran Petrescu received the summons at 7:43 in the morning. It arrived through the hotel's internal communication system, a message from the owner's office, flagged urgent, requesting his immediate presence in the executive conference room on the second floor. The message was signed by Octavian Luca's director of operations, a woman named Cristina Aldea, who had worked for the hotel group for 16 years and was known across every property in the portfolio for two things: absolute competence and the complete absence of patience for men who confused their title with their worth. Petrescu had read the message 3 times. Then he had straightened his jacket and told himself it was routine. Men like Petrescu were skilled at telling themselves things. It was, in many ways, the primary qualification for the kind of work he had been doing, the quiet, lateral work, the work that existed alongside the official work and required its own maintenance. He had been telling himself for 8 months that the arrangement with Barbu was manageable, contained, that the money was clean enough, the paperwork tight enough, the woman ordinary enough that no one with real authority would ever look in her direction. He had been telling himself, since the previous night, that the man in the black suit was simply an agitated guest who would be handled through standard complaint channels and forgotten by morning. He walked into the conference room at 7:51. Victor was already there. He was standing near the window with his back partially turned, looking out at the gray morning with his hands loosely at his sides. He had changed at some point a different shirt, same dark jacket, the tattoos still visible at the collar and cuffs. He looked, Petrescu thought with a confusion he couldn't immediately account for, as though he had not slept and was entirely unbothered by this. Cristina Aldea sat at the head of the conference table with a laptop open and a printed file beside it. She did not look up when Petrescu entered. 2 men Petrescu did not recognize stood near the door. He stopped walking when he saw them. "Mr. Petrescu," Cristina said, still not looking up. "Please sit down." Petrescu sat down. Victor turned from the window. He moved to the table without hurry and took a seat across from Petrescu, and for a moment it said nothing, simply looked at the man with the same quality of attention he had directed at him the previous night in the lobby. That look that contained no hostility and no warmth, and somehow, for that reason, was worse than either. Cristina turned the laptop to face Petrescu. On the screen were financial records, account numbers, transfer dates, amounts, the intermediary company names that had seemed, 8 months ago, sufficiently obscured to be invisible. They had not been sufficiently obscured. Petrescu looked at the screen, then at Cristina, then, slowly, at Victor. "I don't understand what—" "You're looking at 8 months of payments," Victor said. "Received from an intermediary account registered to a facilities contractor that does not exist. Originating from a private account held by a man named Gelu Barbu." He paused. "You know that name." It was not a question. The color had begun leaving Petrescu's face in the specific way that color leaves faces when the body understands something before the mind is ready to. "I want to be clear about what this meeting is," Victor continued. His voice was level, unhurried, carrying the particular calm of a man who had already decided every outcome and was now simply administering the sequence. "This is not a negotiation. It is not an opportunity to provide context. It is a notification." He folded his hands on the table. "By 9 o'clock this morning, Charlotte White will have received every withheld wage, plus compensation. By 10 o'clock, your access to every system in this hotel will have been revoked. By 11, you will have been formally separated from your position with cause, and the documentation supporting that separation will be filed with the relevant bodies." Petrescu's mouth opened. "The cause," Victor said, before anything could come out of it, "will be recorded accurately. Acceptance of bribes, deliberate manipulation of employee records, complicity in a scheme designed to deprive a seriously ill single mother of her income and ultimately her custody of her child." He let that sit. "That will follow you." "You can't," Petrescu stopped, recalibrated. "Who are you?" His voice had shed its professional pleasantness entirely. What was underneath it was smaller. "You're a guest. You have no authority in this. He has every authority in this." Cristina said it without looking up from her laptop. The flatness with which she delivered it was more devastating than any elaboration would have been. Petrescu looked at Victor. Victor said nothing. He did not explain himself. He did not reach for a title or a credential or the particular vocabulary men use to establish their position in a hierarchy. He simply held Petrescu's gaze and allowed the silence to do what silence does when it occupies a room alongside someone who is completely comfortable inside it. It took approximately 11 seconds. Then something in Petrescu's face changed to collapse, small but total, like a structure that had been load-bearing something too heavy for too long and had finally, quietly, given way. His eyes moved to the financial records on the laptop screen, to Christina's expression, to the two men by the door, and then he understood, not just what was happening in this room, but what he had done last night in the lobby, who he had stood in front of and given excuses to and attempted to manage with corporate language and careful deflection. "You own," he started. "I have interests," Victor said simply, "in many things." The full weight of his miscalculation arrived on Petrescu's face, all at once. 8 months of careful construction, dismantled overnight. A career, revoked before 9 o'clock. And the man he had dismissed as an agitated guest, sitting across a conference table looking at him with the patient, settled expression of someone for whom this outcome had never been in question. Christina closed the laptop. "Security will escort you to collect your personal items," she said. "You have 30 minutes. She stood, gathered the printed file, and left the room. The two men by the door stepped forward. Petrescu stood slowly, like a man whose legs were doing the work his mind had abdicated. He looked at Victor once more, a final, complicated look that contained several things Victor had no interest in receiving. Then he was gone. Victor remained seated. He looked at the empty chair across from him and the closed laptop and the morning light coming gray and flat through the conference room window. His phone buzzed. A message from the clinic. Charlotte White had woken up. He read it twice. Then he stood, straightened his jacket, and allowed himself one thing he very rarely allowed, a slow, quiet exhale that carried with it the particular relief of a weight that had been correctly placed down. Petrescu was finished, but there was still someone else. And that conversation, Victor thought as he walked toward the door, would require a very different room. Gelu Barbu believed the morning was going well. He had woken at 8, made coffee, checked his phone. Nothing from Petrescu yet, but that wasn't unusual. The man communicated in his own time, through channels that maintained comfortable distance between them. Barbu had learned patience over the past 8 months. He had learned to trust the process, the slow, grinding process of watching Charlotte's situation deteriorate. One withheld paycheck at a time, one manufactured absence at a time. He was on his second coffee when the knock came. Not a doorbell, a knock. 3 times, unhurried, with the specific cadence of someone who was not uncertain about whether they would be answered. Barbu opened the door. 2 men he had never seen stood in the corridor outside his apartment. Large men, with the particular stillness of people for whom stillness is professional. One of them spoke. "Mr. Barbu, someone would like a word." It was phrased as a courtesy. Barbu understood immediately that it was not one. The meeting took place in a room on the ground floor of a building 12 minutes from Barbu's apartment, a room that belonged, nominally, to a logistics company Victor held interest in. It was unremarkable. A table, chairs, a window overlooking a narrow street where the morning traffic moved in gray, indifferent streams. Victor was already seated when Barbu was brought in. Barbu was a broad man, not tall, but built with the particular density of someone who had spent years believing physical size was a form of argument. He had the remnants of good looks and the specific expression of a man accustomed to controlling rooms through a combination of volume and proximity. 2 restraining orders had not adjusted his posture. A lost custody case had not adjusted it. He sat down across from Victor with his jaw set and his eyes already performing their calculation. "I don't know who you are," Barbu said. "Yes, you do," Victor said. "You just don't know my name yet." Barbu looked around the room. The 2 men from his doorway were stationed near the exit. No one else. He looked back at Victor, and something in the quality of Victor's attention, that complete, unhurried focus, made the calculation behind his eyes begin running faster. "If this is about Charlotte, it is about Charlotte," Victor said, "and it is about Harper." The name landed differently than Barbu expected. He had anticipated legal language, official channels, the vocabulary of process and procedure. He had not anticipated the child's name being said in that tone, quiet and direct, and carrying, somehow, the full weight of what that name represented. He shifted in his chair. "I have rights," Barbu said. Regardless of what Charlotte has told you, I have legal rights regarding my daughter and—" "You had legal rights," Victor said. "You spent them on a bribery scheme." Barbu's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you think you—" "Doran Petrescu was dismissed this morning," Victor said, "with documented cause. The financial records connecting his payments to your accounts have been filed. The communications between you," Victor paused, "have been recovered. A single beat. Tiberiu is very thorough." The name meant nothing to Barbu, but the word recovered did. He watched Barbu absorb it the specific way a man absorbs information that rearranges everything he thought was secured. The set jaw remained, but something behind the eyes had changed. "You don't have—" "I have everything," Victor said simply. "I want you to understand that clearly before I tell you what happens next." He held Barbu's gaze with the patience of a man who had nowhere else to be. "What happens next is this. The documentation goes to your custody attorney, to the family court, and to the financial crimes unit. Your visitation rights, what remained of them, will be reviewed in light of a deliberate, sustained conspiracy to endanger your child's welfare." He paused. "Because that is what it was. You engineered the exhaustion and financial collapse of the only stable parent Harper has. You used your daughter as leverage. That is what the documentation shows, and that is what it will say." Barbu said nothing. His hands on the table were very still. "That is the legal consequence," Victor continued. "I am not here to deliver legal consequences. I am here to deliver a personal one." He leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, not theatrically, just closing the distance enough that what he said next could not be mistaken for anything other than what it was. "Stay away from Charlotte White. Stay away from Harper. Remove yourself from their lives completely and permanently. Do not contact them. Do not approach them. Do not instruct anyone else to do so on your behalf." A pause. "This is the only time I will say this." Barbu stared at him. "You can't enforce." "I'm not enforcing anything," Victor said. "I'm informing you." He leaned back. His voice had not changed in volume or temperature throughout the entire conversation. It did not change now. "You built a careful plan over 8 months. You found a man with manageable debts, and you moved money through channels you believed were invisible, and you slowly, deliberately pushed a sick woman toward collapse, while her 6-year-old daughter sat on a bench in a hotel lobby at midnight, holding a purple backpack." He stopped. "That plan arrived at me. I need you to understand what that means." The room was very quiet. Barbu was not a man who frightened easily. Victor knew the type, had known many of them, across many rooms. Men whose sense of themselves was so heavily constructed that fear had to find unusual entry points. It had found one. Victor could see it in the stillness of those hands on the table. In the way Barbu's eyes had stopped performing their calculation, and had simply gone flat and present in the way eyes go when a person is receiving something they cannot yet process, but cannot deny receiving. "Harper will not grow up wondering where her stability went," Victor said quietly. "She will not grow up watching her mother rebuild from nothing because someone decided she was useful as a point of pressure." He paused one final time. "You are going to let them go, completely. And you are going to do it because you have understood this morning, in this room, that the alternative is not something you want to investigate." Barbu said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked down at his hands on the table. Something moved across his face, not remorse, not exactly, but the particular deflation of a man whose architecture has been systematically taken apart, and who is standing in the rubble of it, without anything left to hide behind. "There won't be any more contact," he said finally. His voice was flat, stripped of its performance. Victor looked at him for one more moment. Then he stood. He did not extend a hand. He did not offer a closing remark or a summary, or any of the punctuation men sometimes add to moments like this to make them feel concluded on their own terms. He simply left. Outside, the morning had not improved. Still gray, still damp, the city going about its Tuesday, with the complete indifference cities maintain toward the private catastrophes occurring inside their buildings. Victor walked to the car and got in and sat for a moment looking at the street. Radu, in the driver's seat, did not ask how it had gone. After a while, Victor said, "The clinic." Radu pulled out. Victor looked out the window at the gray city moving past, and thought about a little girl who had learned how to wait alone, who had learned to fold granola bar wrappers into precise small squares, who had looked at a stranger's face in a hotel lobby and decided, with her mother's taught assessment, that he was safe. He thought about what it would mean for her to grow up without that weight, to simply grow up He looked at the rain on the window. Faster, he said quietly. Radu accelerated. And Victor Ciobanu, who had spent 19 years moving through a city that feared his name. I sat in the back of a car at 10 in the morning and felt something unfamiliar occupying the space in his chest, where the tension of the last 12 hours had been. It took him a moment to identify it. It was the specific, uncommon quiet of a thing that had been wrong for a long time being made right. He did not examine it too closely, but he did not push it away either. He let it stay. Charlotte woke to the sound of Harper breathing. It was the first thing she registered, before the unfamiliar ceiling, before the medical equipment, before the soft ambient light of a room that was clearly not her own. Harper's breathing. The small, even rhythm of it, close by, completely relaxed in the way children's breathing is relaxed when they feel genuinely safe. Charlotte turned her head. Harper was asleep in the chair beside the bed, head resting on her folded arms at the mattress edge, her purple backpack on the floor beneath the chair, her hand still loosely holding Charlotte's, even in sleep. Charlotte looked at her daughter for a long time without moving. The last clear memory she had was the hotel suite, the cleaning trolley, the floor coming up, the specific quality of her own exhaustion when it had finally, after weeks of being refused, simply taken what it was owed. She remembered thinking, in that descending moment, not about herself but about Harper waiting in the staff room, whether she had enough of the granola bars Charlotte had packed, whether she was frightened. She had not allowed herself to think about how bad it had gotten, until the floor. The floor had made the decision for her. She became aware, gradually, of how she felt, which was weak in the thorough, deep tissue way that signals the body has finally stopped performing and has begun the quiet work of repair. Her head was clear despite the weakness. An IV line ran to her left arm. The room was warm. She had no idea how she had arrived here. She was trying to reconstruct it, carefully, when the door opened. Victor stepped in quietly, the way he had moved through the hotel lobby without announcement, without taking up more space than necessary. He was in the same dark jacket. He looked like a man who had covered significant distance since they had last occupied the same space, and who had covered it entirely on his own terms. He stopped when he saw her eyes open. "You're awake," he said. "Yes." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She cleared her throat. "I've been trying to work out how I got here." "My car," Victor said. She looked at him. "You carried me out of the hotel." "You walked," he said, "with assistance." A pause. Charlotte looked down at Harper, still sleeping against the mattress edge. Her throat tightened in the specific way it tightened when she was managing something large and did not have the resources to manage it with anything but control. "She stayed all night," Victor said, answering the question she hadn't asked. "She didn't leave the chair." Charlotte pressed her lips together briefly, looked at the ceiling, looked back at her daughter. "She does that," she said quietly. "She stays." "I know," Victor said. He moved to the chair near the window, not the one Harper occupied, the one angled slightly further away, and sat down with the particular ease of a man who had decided the room was where he needed to be and saw no reason to qualify it. Charlotte looked at him properly for the first time. In the hotel, she had only registered impressions, the dark suit, the tattoos, the steadiness. Now she looked at him the way she looked at things when she had sufficient stillness to actually see them. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said. "No," Victor agreed. "Then why did you?" He considered the question, as he had considered Harper's similar question in the lobby, with a seriousness that suggested he was not going to offer her the comfortable, deflecting answer. "Because your daughter looked up at me," he said finally, "and I recognized something." Charlotte waited. "The way she was sitting," he said. "The way she knew how to wait." He paused. "My mother used to work nights, cleaning." He said it without elaboration, without the performance of vulnerability, simply as a fact. "I sat in waiting rooms and lobbies when I was not much older than Harper. I knew how to wait too." Charlotte was very still. "I am not the same kind of person your mother was," she said carefully. "No," Victor said, "but Harper is the same kind of child I was, and no one made a phone call for my mother." He looked at his hands briefly. "I had a phone. It seemed like a reasonable use of it." The room was quiet. Outside, the rain had finally, after its long night of persistence, begun to ease. Charlotte looked at her daughter sleeping with her hand still holding hers, and felt something move through her that was too large and too complex to name in any single word. Gratitude was in it, and relief, and the specific exhaustion of a person who has been strong for a very long time, and has just been told, for perhaps the first time, that they are allowed to stop. Her eyes filled. She did not try to prevent it. The wages have been transferred, Victor said quietly. All of them, plus compensation. The manager was dismissed this morning. The owner of the hotel has asked that I convey his personal apology for what that is worth. Charlotte absorbed this, and she stopped. Victor looked at her steadily. Barbu will not be a problem. The way he said it required no further explanation. Charlotte understood, with the instinctive comprehension of a person who had spent years reading the difference between promises and certainties, that this was a certainty. She exhaled long and slow, and carrying in it the compressed weight of 8 months. Harper stirred at the sound. Her eyes opened, unfocused briefly, then found her mother's face with the instant, complete relief of a child whose internal compass had been pointing at one direction all night and had finally found true north. Mommy. She sat up. You're awake. I'm awake, baby, Charlotte said. Harper stood from the chair and climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and fitted herself against her mother's side with the same quiet ferocity as the lobby the night before. Charlotte's arm came around her face pressed into Harper's hair. Victor looked at the window. He gave them the privacy of his attention being elsewhere, which was the most private thing he could offer in a room this size. After a while, Harper's voice came, slightly muffled against her mother's side. I told you he would help, she said. Charlotte made a sound that was partly a laugh and partly something else entirely. Yes, she said softly. You did. Harper lifted her head and looked across at Victor with the direct, evaluating gaze that had stopped him in the lobby. Are you going to visit us? She asked. Victor looked at her. The hotel owner has offered your mother a different position, he said. Better hours, better pay, if she wants it. Charlotte looked at him. And if I want it? Then Harper would visit the hotel, Victor said. I have meetings there occasionally. Harper considered this with great seriousness. Okay, she decided. Charlotte looked at Victor across the room, across the distance between the chair by the window and the bed where she held her daughter, and the look she gave him was too layered and too honest to be reduced to any single expression. Thank you, she said, simply, completely. Victor gave a small nod. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked at Harper. Eat something, he said. You've been in that chair all night. Harper considered pushing back on this. Then she apparently decided against it. Can it be the good breakfast? She asked. With the eggs? Victor stood from the chair. I'll tell them, he said. And he walked to the door, and opened it, and stepped out into the corridor, and stood there for a moment in the functional quiet of the hallway, his hand still on the doorframe, his eyes on the middle distance. Something had shifted in the architecture of the last 18 hours. He could feel it not dramatically, not with the weight of revelation, just the quiet, solid sense of a thing that had been set right, of a phone call made at the right moment, of a lobby crossed at the right time, of a man who had learned, a long time ago, how to wait, and had grown into someone who no longer had to. He straightened and went to arrange breakfast. The Blackwood Grand looked the same. That was the thing Charlotte noticed on her first morning back, the lobby unchanged, the chandelier casting the same warm geometry across the same marble floors, the reception desk staffed with the same careful professionalism, the table lamps burning at their same calibrated warmth. The building had continued, indifferently, through everything that had happened inside it, but she was not the same person who had cleaned its floors. The new position was in guest relations, a role that had opened, quietly and without public advertisement, in the week following Petrescu's dismissal. Christina Aldea had called Charlotte directly. The conversation had been brief, and without ceremony. The position was available. The salary was specified. The start date was at Charlotte's discretion given her recovery. Charlotte had listened to all of it, and then asked one question. Why me? Christina had paused for exactly 1 second. Because, she said, you came to work when you shouldn't have had to. That tells me what I need to know. Charlotte had started on a Tuesday. Harper came with her that first morning. It was a school holiday, and Charlotte was not yet comfortable with the idea of distance between them that wasn't necessary. Harper wore her olive green jacket and carried the purple backpack and walked through the hotel entrance with the particular gravity of a child, revisiting a place that holds significant personal history. She stopped at the wooden bench near the glass wall, looked at it for a moment, then looked up at her mother. This is where I sat, she said. I know, Charlotte said. Harper studied the bench with an expression that was difficult to read, something between solemnity and a quiet pride, as though the bench represented something she had done that she understood, in retrospect, to have mattered. Then she moved on. Charlotte was shown to her workspace by a colleague named Florina, who was warm and efficient, and asked no questions about the circumstances that had preceded Charlotte's arrival in this role. Charlotte was grateful for this. She was learning, carefully, how to exist in this building as something other than invisible. It was not simple. The floors she walked were the same floors she had cleaned. The suites upstairs were the same suites. The service corridors existed behind the walls she now moved in front of. There were moments, small, private moments, when she felt the weight of that double geography pressing against her composure. She moved through them the way she had moved through harder things. One breath at a time, Victor arrived at the hotel at 11. He came the way he always came, without announcement, with Radu a few paces behind, with the unhurried quality of a man whose relationship with time was one of mutual respect rather than competition. He was there for a meeting on the 14th floor, a different meeting than the one he had never made it to, on a different matter entirely. He crossed the lobby. He was nearly at the elevator when he heard his name. Not his full name, not Mr. Chiobanu, or the careful half-whisper that usually carried his name in spaces like this. Just Victor. He turned. Harper was standing near the reception desk, backpack on, jacket slightly askew from what appeared to have been a rapid movement across the lobby. She was looking at him with those steady dark eyes, and the expression he had come to understand was her version of restrained excitement, which was, in Harper's particular emotional vocabulary, approximately equivalent to anyone else's unbridled joy. He stopped walking. She crossed the remaining distance between them, with the focused purpose she brought to everything, stopping in front of him and looking up. "You came," she said, as though his presence required acknowledgement before anything else could proceed. "I have a meeting," he said. "I know." She nodded seriously. "Mommy said you have meetings here sometimes." "I do." She studied him for a moment. Then she reached into the front pocket of her backpack and produced something, which she held out to him with both hands, and the grave formality of someone presenting something of genuine significance. It was a drawing, crayon on white paper, folded twice. He took it and opened it carefully. It depicted, with the confident economy of a child's hand, a hotel lobby suggested by a chandelier that was mostly a yellow circle with lines radiating outward, and a floor rendered in careful parallel lines. On one side of the drawing, a small figure sat on a brown rectangle that was clearly a bench. The figure had a purple backpack. On the other side, a taller figure crouched down. The taller figure had lines on its hands and neck. Between them, in Harper's careful, oversized handwriting, "The man who saved my mommy." Victor looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he looked at Harper. She was watching him with that patient, evaluating gaze, waiting to see what he did with it. Not nervously. She was not a nervous child, had never been a nervous child, had simply been a child who had learned to wait and watch and assess with a precision that had nothing to do with her age. "Thank you," he said. "You can keep it," she said generously. "I intend to." He folded it carefully with the same precision she had applied to the granola bar wrapper on the lobby bench and placed it in the inside pocket of his jacket. Harper watched this with evident satisfaction. Charlotte appeared from across the lobby, slightly breathless, with the expression of a mother who has briefly lost visual contact with her child in a public space. Harper. She arrived beside her daughter and looked at Victor. Something moved across her face, the complex, layered look he had seen in the clinic room. Relief and embarrassment and gratitude, and something beyond all of those that she had not yet found words for, and perhaps did not need to. "She saw you from the desk," Charlotte said. "I couldn't stop her. I noticed," Victor said. "I hope she didn't." "She gave me something," Victor said. He touched the inside pocket of his jacket, briefly. "It was worth stopping for." Charlotte looked at him for a moment. Then she looked down at Harper, who was watching the exchange with the careful attention she brought to adult conversations she had decided were important. "Go back to Florina," Charlotte told her. "I'll be there in a moment." Harper looked at Victor. "Will you be here when I come back?" she asked. "I'll be upstairs," he said. "For a while." She considered this. "Okay." She looked at him once more with that steady, direct gaze, the gaze that had stopped him in the lobby on a rainy Tuesday night, that had redirected the entire course of what followed, simply by being honest and unafraid. "Bye, Victor," she said. "Goodbye, Harper." She turned and walked back across the lobby with her backpack and her gravity and her olive green jacket, and did not look back, because Harper White, at 6 years old, had already learned that you didn't need to look back at things you trusted to still be there. Victor watched her go. Beside him, Charlotte was quiet for a moment. She talks about you, she said finally. At home, she tells people her teacher, Mrs. Aldea. Next door, she tells them about the man from the hotel. What does she tell them? Charlotte smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile without exhaustion behind it. She tells them you were sitting in the right place, she said. That you had a phone and it was a reasonable use of it. Victor was quiet. She listens, Charlotte said gently. Yes, he said. She does. He looked across the lobby at the wooden bench near the glass wall, at the chandelier light across the marble floors, at the rain-cleaned windows through which the city showed, this morning, in pale winter sun rather than gray, the city that whispered his name carefully, the city that knew what he was. He thought about a drawing folded in his inside pocket, crayon lines on white paper, a bench, 2 figures, the careful, oversized handwriting of a child who had decided, without hesitation, what he was to her. Not the same thing the city decided, something smaller, something that required no fear to sustain it, and no power to maintain it, and no careful management of anyone's perception. Just a bench, 2 figures, and the words of a 6-year-old girl who had learned, on a rainy Tuesday night, that the right person, in the right place, at the right moment, could change the entire shape of what came next. Victor Ciobanu straightened his jacket. He nodded once to Charlotte, and walked toward the elevator with the drawing folded against his chest, and did not examine too closely the fact that it was, without question, the most valuable thing he was carrying. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.
А все равно, сути дела не меняет, зарплата плюс-минус везде там, больше, чуть меньше. И, наверное, это все, вот эта общая ситуация, наверное, у многих привела, во-первых, сфера развлечений, да, всякие там кредиты и так далее, настолько загоняют каждого в задницу человека. И об этом на самом деле никто так-то не говорит. Какое количество сейчас, допустим, даже в те же сложные времена такие, когда сейчас там специальная военная операция, да, где люди вообще умирают, в принципе, за какую-то сумму денег. То есть какая мотивация, то есть у мужика идти типа на войну, воевать и заработать денег? Потому что он вот в обычной жизни не понимает, типа, как реализовать себя. Он понимает, что он может пойти работать на какую-то работу, где зарплаты его все равно не будет хватать. Тут тоже двойственная сторона. Хорошо, когда она есть, плохо, когда ее нету. Да, вот это маленькая даже зарплаты. Но морально-то ты все равно подавлен. Ты понимаешь, да, я там пойду туда, но смысла мне этого не принесет большого. Да, у меня там станет, если я вообще не работаю и буду работать за 50 тысяч, хорошо, что они у меня есть, я смогу там покушать себе купить, но это же дизмораль. Когда ты заходишь в интернет и видишь, как люди там в Дубае летают, покупают себе огромное количество автомобилей какие-то, много всего такого, что ты за эту зарплату себе никогда в жизни позволить не сможешь. И как человеку оставаться морально типа сильным? Что ему нужно делать? Наверное, во-первых, это, наверное, все от семьи исходит, да? То есть, какая семья у тебя, как она построена. Если ты один живешь, это сложно, да, ты будешь сам себя, но у тебя опять-таки, возможно, родители, если есть, которые друзья поддержат тебя в какой-то момент, хотя бы просто отвлекут тебя от этих мыслей. А если у тебя, к примеру, там семья, жена, к примеру, да, есть дети, то тут, наверное, поддержка только от них исходит какая-то. Вот, чтобы не упиваться в своих мыслях о том, что какая нынче сложная жизнь. И наверное, других-то вариантов в принципе-то и нету. Какие вот еще варианты, в принципе, изменить, поменять свою жизнь настолько, чтобы она была, ну, казалась тебе удачной, да, реализованным себя в жизни, в чем-то. В чем, вот как проявляется на самом деле у нас реализованность? Наверное, у 90% случаев это финансовое благополучие, финансовая независимость. Это, наверное, одно из таких ключевых моментов, когда человек, наверное, считает себя реализованным, да, в этой жизни. То есть, как добиться этого? То есть, с учетом того, что даже возьмем нашу страну, да, сколько миллионов людей здесь живет, как каждому добиться этого результата? Непонятно. И с каждым годом просто ситуация становится все хуже и хуже. Все дорожает, люди зарабатывают либо столько же. Ну, даже если они зарабатывают столько же, на самом деле этого все уже недостаточно. А к чему это все приведет на самом деле? В оконцове, наверное, мир погрязнет в большую депрессию, в какую-то. Какие-то войны, возможно, или еще что-то еще больше глобальных таких вещей, которые не приведут ни к чему хорошему на самом деле. Поддержка каждого человека именно для того, чтобы он держался, наверное, морально, заключается в том, что, ну, наверное, дом, в который ты приходишь, должен быть крепостью твоей. Да? Что это единственное должно быть место, где ты будешь чувствовать себя под защитой. Для этого было придумано, наверное, своя пещера изначально, потом свои какие-то чумы, палатки различные, да, потом все это превратилось. На данный момент это у нас дома, квартиры, в которые мы приходим и должны ощущать себя в безопасности. Чтобы можно быть немного морально расслабленным с учетом того, что ты выходишь каждый день на работу, на улицу, и все равно давление вот это вот, оно все присутствует. Когда ты заходишь в магазин, видишь цены эти, да, и так далее, не можешь себе что-то там приобрести, позволить на ежедневной основе, это откладывает большой, наверное, отпечаток. Не, наверное, а точно. И поэтому, когда возвращаясь домой, ты чувствуешь, вот хотя бы есть типа уголок того места, куда ты можешь прийти. Уголок на самом деле человеку много тоже не надо. Можно хотеть большего, но на самом деле человеку одному много не надо. Да? Ему нужно спальное место, спокойное место, где можно подумать. Ну, это когда ты один, к примеру, да? Когда у тебя есть семья, к примеру, ты приходишь домой, опять-таки, и тут хотя бы, да, поговорить о каких-то вещах. Просто об отрешенных вещах, наверное. И, возможно, при этих же условиях у тебя и появляется какая-то дополнительная мотивация для реализации себя. А когда у тебя нету ничего, вот это уже становится проблемой. И это у многих на самом деле. Что значит не иметь ничего? Тут, наверное, самое главное, дизмораль у человека еще возникает при том, что это уже, наверное, где-то в глубине души даже она возникает при даже хорошей финансовой подушке такой, которая у тебя есть, хороших финансовых деньгах, да, то есть, но нету вот внутреннего ощущения, к примеру, дружбы, семьи, любви и так далее. Это уже отдельно на самом деле разговор, потому что мы, вот, к примеру, можем взять, как сейчас вот Новстрой, если кто-то смотрит, насколько тяжело обладать такими финансами и не иметь, по сути, ничего. Ни друзей, ничего не иметь. Так главное это получается для бедных главное деньги, для богатых главное какое-то внутреннее ощущение нужности, не из-за денег. Вот такой вот. И эта борьба какая-то такая и вот эти два слоя общества, богатые и бедные, они друг друга не понимают. На самом деле из-за этого возможно. Потому что богатый человек, он уже не смотрит на деньги, он не считает эти деньги. Ему важно внутреннее вот это вот ощущение того, что он нужен без них даже. Это как Тони Старку сказали: а кто ты без костюма? На вот это я филантроп, тудым-сюдым, он сказал, да? Так и человеку, у которого много денег, ты задашь вопрос: а кто ты без денег? Ну, что ты представляешь себе без денег? Вот и это, наверное, возможно, таких людей богатых, как вот, например, там Новстрой, задав ему этот вопрос: а кто ты без денег? Он на него ответить-то и не сможет. Обратная сторона людей бедных, да, вот если мы посмотрим, человеку